He who masters silence, fear, and illusion does not rule only others, but also his own destiny. Have you ever stopped to wonder why some people enter a room and everyone immediately falls silent, as if an invisible presence had taken over the space? Why do some individuals not need to shout, not need to beg for respect, and yet are feared, respected, and followed almost instinctively? There's something almost supernatural about this aura, but the truth is, it's not mystical. It's strategic. It's calculated. It's built on principles that don't appear in common leadership manuals, but on something much deeper, the Machiavellian art of power. And if you want to be remembered, respected, and impossible to ignore, you need to understand that the world doesn't reward the naive. The world, since the beginning of history, has always bowed to those who learn to manipulate the invisible gears that drive human relationships. Machiavelli understood like few others that life is not governed by justice, kindness, or equality. Life is governed by perception. What you appear to be matters far more than what you actually are. How many times have you seen someone mediocre gain ground, simply because they knew how to position themselves firmly, while more intelligent or talented people remained in the shadows? This apparent injustice is nothing more than confirmation of the unwritten laws of power. Whoever controls perception controls reality. And here begins the first turning point. If you want to be feared and respected, you must abandon once and for all the illusion that being good, being fair, or being hardworking is enough. The world does not bow to pure virtue. The world bows to perceived strength, to cold discipline, to a presence that refuses to be ignored. You can hide behind excuses or rebel against this truth, but nothing will change the fact that the majority will be slaves to their own naivete, while a minority rules because they understand and apply the hidden laws of power. The initial impact is this: true respect isn't born of love. Love is volatile. It can be lost overnight. It depends on unstable emotions. Respect and fear, however, endure because they aren't based on fragile feelings, but on a power structure you build over time. Think about historical figures. How many were loved and then forgotten? And how many were feared and are still remembered today as indestructible? The world doesn't write memoirs for the pleasant. The world writes for those who left scars. But how do you build this? The first layer of this foundation is silent discipline. Being feared and respected requires absolute self-control. The man who cannot control his own emotions, who explodes at the slightest provocation, will never be seen as master of anything. He will be merely a predictable toy, easy to manipulate. Machiavelli said that the prince must be both lion and fox, strong enough to inspire fear, yet cunning enough to foresee traps. And this duality begins within you, in your ability to remain silent when everyone expects you to speak, to act when everyone believes you would hesitate, to endure when everyone around you crumbles. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Calculated silence is a lethal weapon. When you don't rush into answers, when you don't reveal everything you think, you create mystery. And mystery is one of the pillars of respect. Predictable people don't scare anyone. People who always say yes, who reveal their plans, who justify themselves with every criticism, end up diminishing their own aura. Have you ever noticed how the most feared rarely say much? They say little, but each word carries weight because it's preceded by a presence that already intimidates. Now imagine for a moment, how many opportunities have you missed in life by talking too much, explaining yourself too much, trying too hard to please? How many times have you missed the chance to be seen as unshakable simply because you couldn't stand the silence? This is the first invisible law. Learn to keep quiet, not because you don't have an answer, but because the absence of an answer is worth more than any argument. And here's another provocation. Have you ever wondered why your kindness doesn't generate respect? Because excessive kindness is interpreted as weakness. Human beings, deep down, fear what can punish, not what can forgive infinitely. Forgiveness without limits doesn't inspire gratitude, it inspires abuse. How many people have approached you just to suck, and when you had nothing left to give, simply disappeared? They didn't respect you, they just took advantage of your generosity. And this happens because you haven't yet applied the Machiavellian law of setting limits. Limits are power. When you impose boundaries, when you make it clear that there are consequences for crossing them, you awaken something in the other person, the feeling that they can't treat you like everyone else. Respect is born there, not from love, not from sympathy, but from the recognition that you are not someone to be trifled with. And what happens when you start applying these principles? The world changes before you. People start to measure their words when they speak in front of you. The easy laugh disappears, replaced by caution. The look in your eyes changes. And this change doesn't come because you've become cruel for no reason, but because you understand that life demands poise. This is where the game begins to change. You might be thinking, but if I'm like this, won't they hate me? Yes, perhaps. But silent hatred is better than contempt. Contempt is lethal. Hatred at least carries the mark of respect. No one hates the weak. The weak are ignored. They only hate those who have enough power to make a difference. So if some people hate you, smile. It means you're no longer invisible. Think about how many times you've tried to be loved by everyone and ended up being respected by no one. The desire to be liked is an addiction, an emotional prison that keeps you submissive. You adapt, bend, mold yourself to expectations, and in the end, you're just another face in the crowd. Now imagine if instead you became impossible to ignore. Imagine if, upon entering any room, your presence was felt before you even spoke. It's this kind of transformation that the 18 Machiavellian Laws promise. But be careful. It's not about becoming a mindless tyrant, someone who merely shouts or threatens. Machiavellian power is refined. It's made of emotional control, invisible strategies, and cold, calculated choices. The truly feared person isn't the one who bangs the table and demands respect. That kind of respect is fragile and dissolves quickly. The truly feared person is the one who, even in silence, dominates, who inspires caution even in the simplest gestures, who doesn't need to say, "Respect me," because respect is already implicit. And now I ask, would you rather continue trying to gain respect with empty words? Or are you ready to build a power that transcends glances, gestures, and silences? Because from here on, we'll delve into the laws that shape this transformation. Laws that will tear you from the ordinary state and place you in the realm of those who cannot be ignored. The path is not easy. It will require detachment, discipline, and a courage few possess. It will require you to face yourself head-on, to accept the hardship of changing not only your external posture, but your entire mind. And above all, it will require you to endure the discomfort of leaving behind the need to be loved. Because only then will you be feared. Only then will you be respected. And if you've already felt the weight of these truths, brace yourself, because what comes next isn't just uncomfortable, it's brutal. Let's begin to unravel the first laws that lay the foundation for inevitable respect. Laws you can apply right now that will make anyone think twice before underestimating you. You've come this far because you understand that naivete doesn't guarantee respect, and that being loved isn't enough to make someone untouchable. Now it's time to descend into the practical realm, where the first laws begin to shape a new foundation, an invisible foundation that will transform the way the world sees you. These laws aren't distant abstractions, but tools applicable in everyday life, in the environments you frequent, in the simplest relationships, and the most complex situations. At every moment of your life, you are being evaluated, albeit silently, by those around you. They measure your posture, your reactions, your way of speaking, even your silence. And it is in this realm that the first laws operate, in the creation of an aura that, even without words, communicates power. Think for a moment about a meeting room. A group of people are discussing. Everyone is speaking at once. And there's that one person who always tries to impose themselves through the volume of their voice. They gesticulate too much, talk too much, repeat weak arguments in the hope of appearing strong. Now compare this figure with someone who remains silent, observing, letting the energy of the room drain away as their fixed eyes move from one face to another. They don't rush. They don't need to justify themselves. When they finally decide to speak, everyone falls silent because they sense their words will carry weight. Who, in this scenario, truly commands respect? It's not the loud one, but the silent one. This is the first shock that many don't understand. Power isn't in always speaking, but in knowing when not to speak. The first practical law that Machiavelli would inspire is this: control your voice, because scarcity gives value. The less you expose yourself, the more expensive each word becomes. And here's the point. In everyday life, you have countless opportunities to apply this. Imagine a personal conflict, someone trying to provoke you with insults, hoping you'll explode. If you react immediately, you lose control, giving in to your emotions. But if you remain calm, limit yourself to a cold stare, and let the silence hang heavy in the air, the feeling changes completely. The provocateur begins to feel uncomfortable, because they expected war, and were met with an impenetrable wall. They realize they failed to reach them, and this failure in itself is a form of victory. The discipline of remaining silent when everyone expects you to speak is a disarming weapon, and this kind of weapon is invisible, but devastating. Another simple example, on social media, where everyone expresses their opinions on everything. Who is truly respected? The one who talks incessantly, or the one who only appears when they have something to say and, when they do, makes an impact? Excess trivializes, scarcity enhances. Digital life shows every day that saturation kills relevance. The same happens in real life. You're predictable. If everyone knows how you'll react, if everyone knows you're always available, you lose your mystery. Mystery is the essence of respect, because what can't be predicted can't be controlled. But let's go deeper. Beyond strategic silence, there's the law of emotional control. This is one of the cruelest because it forces you to fight your most primitive instincts. Human beings are driven by emotions, but those who want to be respected must learn to tame these internal forces as if taming wild animals. Remember, no one follows someone who can't follow themselves. Imagine a leader who loses his temper in public, who screams, who displays despair. He may even instill momentary fear, but this fear doesn't generate true respect. It only generates disguised contempt. On the other hand, someone who remains firm even in chaos conveys security, and security inspires respect. People trust someone who appears unshakable, even when they're on fire inside. Perhaps you've experienced this in small ways. Think about a card game or any negotiation. Those who despair at a small loss betray their weakness. Those who maintain a neutral expression even when at a disadvantage create uncertainty in their opponent. Does they still have better cards? Are they hiding something? This doubt becomes a shield. Self-control not only protects but intimidates. It's like walking through a storm without showing fear. Even if your body is wet, even if the wind blows against you, if you walk firmly, others will feel smaller before you. Now notice an essential detail. These first laws don't depend on external resources. They don't require wealth, position, or connections. They require discipline, and discipline is something anyone can cultivate. Strategic silence, emotional control, the discipline of self-control. All of this can be practiced daily in the most banal situations. It's when someone cuts you off in traffic and you choose not to react immediately. It's when a colleague makes an offensive joke and you just stare at them silently, letting the weight of their gaze do the work. It's when you deny a request without justifying yourself, showing that your decision needs no explanation. Every small choice strengthens your aura, and there's more. There's also the law of calculated appearance. What you show about yourself shouldn't be random, but thought out as part of a narrative. Machiavelli said that men judge more by their eyes than by reason, because everyone can see, but few know how to interpret. This means that your external image is a battlefield. How you dress, how you position yourself, how you organize even your personal space, everything communicates something. Have you ever noticed how some environments convey power simply by the way they're organized? A minimalist, impeccable office conveys more authority than a desk cluttered with papers and clutter. The same goes for you. If your posture is erect, if your gestures are controlled, if your voice is firm, you convey the message that you know who you are. And those who know who they are inspire caution in others. Don't underestimate these details. They seem small, but they add up and create a presence that precedes you. Respected people usually don't need to introduce themselves. They arrive, and the atmosphere changes immediately. This happens because, even before speaking, they already carry within them an invisible narrative built through the discipline of posture, silence, control, and image. It's as if the aura were an energetic field that everyone perceives, albeit unconsciously. And this field doesn't arise by chance. It's cultivated. Here comes an unexpected turning point. Many believe that to be respected they must always be tough, always cold, always inaccessible. But Machiavellian law goes further. It demands calculation. This means that at times the appearance of kindness can be used as a strategy, not because you are genuinely vulnerable, but because by appearing approachable in controlled doses, You generate trust only to later reaffirm your authority. Alternating between toughness and apparent gentleness creates confusion and makes you unpredictable. And as we've seen, the unpredictable always inspires caution. Imagine the scene. A boss known for his coldness and demands suddenly invites his team to an unexpected lunch, showing a lighter side. The impact is much greater than if he were always friendly. Why? Because surprise creates an impact. This alternation, this calculated play of masks, keeps others in a constant state of vigilance. They never know for sure what to expect from you, and what can't be predicted can't be controlled. But perhaps you're wondering, isn't it tiring to live like this, always calculating? Yes, it is tiring, but it's precisely this fatigue that separates the strong from the weak. Most prefer the easy life, where emotions control their actions. Few have the courage to control their own emotions, and even manipulate external perceptions. But it's these few who become respected, remembered, and feared. Mediocrity is comfortable, but power demands discomfort. And here we return to an initial provocation. Do you want to be loved by everyone or respected by everyone? Because the two rarely coexist. Love comes from what you give, respect comes from what you withhold. Love is fueled by what you give, respect by what you withhold. If you keep trying to please, you'll be seen as useful but disposable. You learn to set boundaries and control your own presence. You'll be seen as essential, and even those who hate you will treat you with caution. The curious thing is that, once you master these first laws, people begin to create narratives about you without you having to try. They'll say, "He's too cold, you can't read what he's thinking," or "She never loses control, even when everyone else is nervous." These comments, even when delivered critically, are proof that your aura is working. You're entering people's minds without having to expose yourself. They talk about you because they can't ignore you. This is the first sign that you're leaving the realm of commoners and entering the realm of respected people. But be careful. This process is slow. Don't expect immediate results. The first few times you apply silence, you may feel uncomfortable. The first few times you control a reaction, you may feel your body screaming for revenge. But it's precisely in this friction that power is formed. Each time you resist the urge to justify yourself, you strengthen your presence. Each time you endure the discomfort of being misunderstood without explaining, you build another brick in the wall of authority. And when the wall is high enough, no one will dare treat you like anyone else. Think about it. Kings, generals, and leaders who have shaped history all built their authority on invisible discipline. Before governing others, they learned to govern themselves. There is no external power without internal mastery. This is the foundation Machiavelli understood, and one that few are willing to confront, because it's easier to blame the world, blame luck, blame others than to take on the burden of changing yourself. But if you've come this far, it's because you already know that running away is useless. You need to face it, and that's precisely why the next step will be even more brutal. If so far we've been talking about silence, self-control, and image, prepare to enter the realm of the laws of fear, because it's not enough to be respected. To be untouchable, you also need to be feared. Respect protects, but fear protects even more. It's fear that prevents betrayal, that maintains distance, that creates an invisible barrier against those who would dare test your limits. And that's where the true power game begins to show its darkest face. Respect opens doors, but it is fear that keeps those doors closed to those who would dare to cross them without permission. So far, we've talked about silence, discipline, and self-control, the foundations that build a respectable presence. But Machiavelli knew this wasn't enough. Respect can be earned by someone admirable, but only fear prevents betrayal. Only fear maintains the necessary distance between you and those who, deep down, desire your downfall. If respect is a wall, fear is the moat filled with dark water and invisible creatures that prevents any enemy from approaching lightly. Without fear, the wall is merely a facade. With it, it becomes a fortress. It's uncomfortable to admit, but you know it's true. Think about your own life. How many times have you respected someone simply out of admiration, yet allowed yourself to overstep their bounds because you knew there would be no consequences? Now think about the times you avoided challenging someone because you feared the reaction, even without knowing exactly what would happen. Respect brings us closer, but fear paralyzes us. And it's this paralyzing power that transforms an ordinary human being into a figure impossible to ignore. But where does this fear come from? It's not from explicit violence, nor always from shouting or threats. The most effective fear is the one that hangs in the air like a mist. It's the fear born of the unpredictable, of what cannot be precisely calculated. A predictable man may be loved, but he will never be feared. But one who carries uncertainty within, who can smile now and punish later, who appears affable one moment and distant the next, becomes an enigma, and enigmas always arouse fear. Have you ever wondered why some people take you for granted? Could it be because they know exactly how you react in every situation? This is where the law of unpredictability comes in. It's not about being inconsistent or losing your logic, but about breaking the pattern others have become accustomed to. If they always say you're calm, show firmness in an unexpected moment. If they expect your constant generosity, impose a blunt and definitive no. This shock destabilizes, creating fissures in people's perception of you. Suddenly, you're no longer the person they thought they knew, but a figure to be watched carefully. Fear arises from this impossibility of control. When was the last time someone stood in silence in front of you because they didn't know how they would react to your next move? Another fundamental element is calculated coldness. While respect can arise from admiration, fear demands that you demonstrate detachment. A man who seems too attached to love, approval, and the image of being loved will never be seen as a threat. However, someone who shows no hesitation in cutting ties, in abandoning someone when necessary, in acting without being tied to emotions, achieves a kind of aura few can tolerate. Think of the times you've tried to walk away from someone but hesitated for fear of appearing cruel. This hesitation weakened your posture. Now imagine if you had stood your ground with firmness and silence. The outcome would have been different. Isn't it curious how people test the limits of those who are emotionally dependent on them? And here's an unexpected revelation. Calculated cruelty can be more effective than 1,000 acts of kindness. Machiavelli didn't advocate gratuitous violence, but he understood that, when used precisely, harshness becomes a permanent reminder. A rare but striking punishment resonates far more than dozens of acts of tolerance. People don't fear constant generosity. They fear generosity that in a moment can become ruthless. Fear takes root not in frequency, but in memory. Have you ever realized that a single negative experience can weigh more than years of kindness? The art of fear isn't screaming, it's whispering through actions that need no explanation. It's cutting someone out of your life without warning. It's unexpectedly denying a request. It's changing your expression at a critical moment, leaving doubt about what you're thinking. These are small ruptures that make others understand they're not in the presence of someone ordinary. This constant discomfort forces them to measure their words, control their gestures, and calculate their actions. Fear operates like a shadow. You don't need to be present to be remembered. It's enough that the uncertainty of your reaction exists. How many times have you felt someone's presence even when they weren't there, just because of the impact they could have if they appeared? Fear also stems from the ability to keep secrets. Those who reveal everything, who share their pain, their flaws, their intentions may be loved, but they will never be feared. Secrecy creates fertile ground for the imagination, and imagination, when it has no answers, fills the gaps with fear. This is why many leaders in different eras cultivated mystery. They didn't need to show all their cards. It was enough to show one and hide the rest. This way, no one ever knew how far they could go. What do others really know about you? What are you letting slip without realizing it? And then there's the power of distance. Being overly present trivializes your image. Calculated absence, however, creates expectation. People who appear sparingly but with impact become a reference. It's like an eclipse, rare but unforgettable. Fear connects to the mystery of what's distant, but can approach at any moment. The boss who doesn't participate in every conversation but whose final word is decisive maintains a greater aura of authority than one who blends in. Distance gives space for fear to flourish, because the void is filled with assumptions, and assumptions are almost always darker than reality. Do you show off too much? Or do you know how to withdraw at the right moment to become unforgettable? Another underexplored aspect is the art of controlling rewards and punishments. If you offer rewards predictably, they lose their value. If you punish randomly and uncontrollably, you lose legitimacy. But if you balance the two with calculation, fear grows. A subordinate who doesn't know exactly when they'll be punished, but knows punishment will come if they overstep their bounds. always treads cautiously. This state of vigilance is the very essence of fear. It's like living in a house where everyone knows there's a locked room, but no one dares enter. What's the one locked room in your life? Or does everyone already know every corner of your house? The brutality of fear lies in the fact that it cannot be feigned for long. People sense when the threat is real and when it is just an act. Therefore, building this aura requires consistency. You don't need to punish constantly, but you do need to be consistent. When you say no, you mean no. When you draw a line, it cannot be crossed without consequence. Fear grows on solid ground, not shaky ground. Have your words lost weight because you yourself didn't keep your own promises? And perhaps the most fascinating thing about fear is its power to shape behavior without requiring physical force. A mere reputation can keep dozens, hundreds, or thousands of people under control. Leaders who rarely raised their voices were able to keep legions submissive only because they carried within themselves a shadow of unpredictability. Fear is economical. Where force must be used repeatedly, fear acts alone. Where the cry must be renewed, threatening silence speaks eternally. Why waste energy imposing force when the simple memory of you is enough to control? All of this brings us to a crucial point. Fear is not about cruelty for cruelty's sake, but about dominance. It is the constant reminder that you have choices others cannot foresee. It is the invisible sword that hovers over the table in every interaction. It is the silent warning that crossing your boundaries is not a safe option. This construction does not happen overnight, but gesture by gesture, silence by silence, decision by decision. How many of these gestures have you already started applying? Or do you still expect respect just out of kindness? And here we come to the final revelation of this section. Fear, when well cultivated, doesn't drive away, but attracts. May sound paradoxical, but people are instinctively drawn to what they fear. Mystery creates fascination. Unpredictability arouses curiosity. Calculated coldness inspires a desire for closeness, even if accompanied by caution. Fear is the line that separates mediocrity from greatness. It is fear that transforms a simple leader into an almost mythical figure. Now ask yourself, are you ready to be that myth? Because what comes next is even more disturbing. So far, we've talked about silence, coldness, unpredictability, and calculated punishment. But what if I told you that all this isn't enough if you don't master the art of the untouchable image? The next part reveals how to create a presence so solid that neither hatred nor envy nor attempts at destruction can shake it. A presence that not only inspires respect and fear, but also becomes impossible to erase from the collective memory. By now, you understand that respect without fear is unstable, and fear without respect can be nothing more than empty hatred. The next step, the one that separates ordinary figures from eternal ones, is building the untouchable image. What does it mean to be untouchable? It means establishing a presence so strong that even in your absence, you continue to dictate rules, continue to inhabit people's minds, continue to influence behavior. It's the moment when your identity ceases to be merely a present body and becomes a symbol. And symbols cannot be easily torn down because they survive time, space, and even death. But building this image requires more than isolated actions. You need to create an invisible narrative that surrounds you like armor. This narrative is sustained by how you speak, how you carry yourself, how you react, but also by how the world sees you, even when you're not there to confirm or deny anything. There's a curious story about Julius Caesar that illustrates this idea well. During a military campaign, he was captured by pirates in the Mediterranean. The bandits demanded a high ransom, but Caesar calmly laughed at the amount and said it should be higher because he was worth more than that. During his captivity, he behaved not like a prisoner, but like a commander. He exercised, gave speeches, and treated the pirates as temporary subordinates. When he was finally released, he organized a fleet, hunted down those same pirates, and crucified them, as he had promised during his captivity, apparently in jest. What does this reveal? That Caesar understood the importance of image. Even when vulnerable, he didn't allow his narrative to be that of a prisoner. He remained untouchable, and even his enemies were confused, unsure whether they were dealing with a man in danger or an emperor disguised as a hostage. The lesson is clear. Your image must be maintained even in moments of weakness because that's precisely when it's tested. How many times have you allowed a difficult situation to destroy your image in the eyes of others? How many times have you appeared smaller, more fragile or more desperate than you truly were, simply because you gave in to the impulse of the moment. Each time this happens, you open a crack in the invisible armor of untouchability. People begin to see you as accessible, decipherable, all too human. There's nothing wrong with being human, but there's everything wrong with letting your public image reveal every detail of your humanity. The untouchable image arises precisely from the ability to keep your private essence and your public face separate. While the essence may tremble, the face must remain firm, unshakable, and almost immortal. The secret is to understand that most people live by appearances. And if life is made of appearances, those who master their own image dominate the game. Consider how political theater works. Many leaders throughout history were never great administrators, but they were masters of the art of staging. They created symbols of greatness, cultivated memorable gestures, and knew how to appear in public with calculated precision. Napoleon, for example, was obsessed with his own image. He had portraits painted in which he appeared much larger than he actually was, knew how to pose at every ceremony, and chose every detail of his uniform to convey power. Over time, Napoleon's figure became greater than the man himself. Even defeated, exiled, and humiliated, his image survived and is still remembered today as synonymous with ambition and leadership. Do you realize the weight of this? The body can be defeated, but the image cannot, if constructed correctly. And you might think this is just ancient history, but just look at the present. How many current celebrities, business people, or politicians survive simply because they've built untouchable images? Public opinion may attack them, but with each scandal, they return, because their image is already so ingrained that it seems impossible to erase. They've become symbols, and symbols don't need coherence to survive. They simply exist, hovering above common judgment. The question that arises is, how can you apply this to your own life? The answer is simple yet painful. You need to decide what narrative you want the world to believe about you, and live by it every day, even when no one is looking. This requires absolute consistency. If you choose to be seen as cold and calculating, you can't afford childish outbursts in public. If you choose to be seen as fair, you can't be caught committing small injustices. You choose to be seen as inaccessible, you can't be available to everyone at any time. Every choice, every gesture, every absence builds or destroys the narrative. People don't remember details, but they do remember the feeling you evoke in them. It's this feeling that forms the untouchable image. And when this image is solidified, even if you fail in one detail, the symbol remains. It's as if the aura becomes stronger than the mistakes. But there's an even deeper layer, the mask of virtue. Machiavelli asserted that it's not necessary to be virtuous, but it is necessary to appear virtuous. This doesn't mean being false, but understanding that perception is stronger than essence. How many people do you know who are considered honest simply because they appear to be, even if behind the scenes they act questionably? And how many good-hearted people are seen as weak simply because they don't know how to project virtue strategically? The mask of virtue is indispensable because the world does not tolerate overt evil. Naked evil is repellent, but evil masked as virtue is followed with devotion. This is why so many brutal leaders were loved by their people, because they projected a public face of kindness, even when their hands were stained with blood. The masses prefer a comfortable lie to a cruel truth, and those who understand this can become untouchable. Have you ever stopped to think about how many masks you wear in your daily life? The mask of friendliness at work, the mask of patience at home, the mask of confidence in public. The difference between the common and the untouchable is that the common wear masks out of necessity, while the untouchable choose their masks as weapons. It's not about pretending, but about consciously controlling how you'll be perceived. While others improvise, you act. While they reveal themselves by accident, you reveal only what matters. This difference creates a vast distance between being seen as common and being seen as enigmatic. Another essential aspect in constructing the untouchable image is the manipulation of collective memory. People easily forget words, but they never forget powerful scenes. This is why great leaders have always created theatrical moments, captivating speeches, symbolic gestures, unexpected acts that remain etched in memory. Hitler, for example, understood the importance of aesthetics in power. His rallies were calculated performances, with rehearsed lighting, music, and gestures. He didn't just speak, he created experiences. And that's why, even decades after his fall, his image still haunts the collective imagination. The same is true of Martin Luther King, whose "I Have a Dream" speech not only conveyed ideas but also embodied an unforgettable scene. The power of the untouchable image lies in creating moments that replay in people's minds like fragments of eternity. Have you ever created an unforgettable moment? Or does your life pass unnoticed as a stream of banal events? Being untouchable also requires understanding the role of public silence, not responding to criticism, not justifying yourself, not engaging in petty debates. Every time you over-explain yourself, you destroy the aura of mystery. Big names rarely defend themselves. They let their image speak for them. This doesn't mean passivity, but calculation. You choose when to speak, when to appear, when to act. And by choosing, you transform every gesture into a spectacle. What is rare is worth more. What is predictable loses strength. The untouchable image is built on the economy of gestures, the precision of movements, the coolness of silences. There's also the law of aesthetic consistency. It's not just about clothing, but about your entire presence. Someone who changes their style every week conveys instability. Someone who cultivates a coherent aesthetic becomes instantly recognizable. Steve Jobs, for example, with his black t-shirt and jeans, turned simplicity into a brand. This detail, repeated over the years, created a solid image. Small, repetitive symbols become visual armor. Respected people don't change colors every season. They consolidate themselves into a palette, an aesthetic, a pattern. This generates familiarity and authority. Have you thought about what symbols you want to be associated with your name 10 years from now? And perhaps most surprising is understanding that the untouchable image also feeds on the unimaginable. Small, unlikely events can reinforce the aura. When someone survives an accident, when they escape betrayal, when they come back stronger after a fall, it creates the feeling that there's something almost supernatural protecting that person. Leaders who escaped assassination, artists who resurfaced after bankruptcy, warriors who survived impossible battles, all fueled the perception that they are not ordinary. And when the collective mind believes you are not ordinary, you become untouchable. Now imagine, what failures can you turn into symbols? What scars can you display as medals? Because an untouchable image isn't born from the absence of flaws, but from the ability to transform them into legends. And so we arrive at the crucial point. To be untouchable is to cease being just a person and become a myth. While people can be toppled, myths survive. Building a myth requires discipline, calculation, and courage. Courage to choose which masks to wear. Courage to endure silence. Courage to transform pain into a spectacle. But above all, it requires patience. No one becomes untouchable in a year, but those who commit to this narrative build a presence that no enemy can erase. And now the question you need to ask yourself: are you ready to stop being just flesh and blood and become an image? Are you ready to make it impossible to ignore even when hated? Because if so far we've talked about respect, fear, and image, what comes next delves into even darker waters: the invisible manipulation of others, the ability to use allies, enemies, and even friends as pieces on your board. The moment you understand how to manipulate others is the moment the power game truly begins. So far, you've learned to build the wall of respect, nurture the moat of fear, and don the armor of an untouchable image. But all of this would be insufficient if you didn't know how to transform people into pieces on your board. Power is never wielded in a vacuum. It requires instruments, arms to execute, voices to spread the word, eyes to observe. Those who try to rule alone exhaust themselves, but those who understand the art of manipulation transform every human being around them into an extension of their own will. And this is precisely what makes the difference between someone respected in a small circle and someone who becomes a living legend, capable of moving crowds without even raising their voice. Manipulation isn't childish deception, nor is it purposeless lying. Manipulation is leadership. It's knowing which buttons to push in each person, which strings to pull in each situation. It's coldly observing where their weaknesses and hidden desires lie and using them strategically. Every person you cross paths with has something they want, something they fear, something they avoid, and whoever discovers it first will always have the advantage. Imagine that every human being is a safe, and each safe has a key. Some have the key of ambition, others of fear, others of vanity. Most people never bother to look for these keys, but those who live by the logic of power learn to collect them. Once you have the key, the safe opens itself. How many times have you been used without realizing it? How many times have you believed you were making your own decisions, but deep down, you were just executing a script written by someone more cunning? Perhaps a friend who suggested something as if it were just a casual idea, but in fact had already planned your reaction. Perhaps a colleague who praised you only to then ask for a favor. Perhaps even a family member who, through guilt or affection, steered you exactly where they wanted you to go. Manipulation is everywhere, and what separates the strong from the weak is whether you are the author of the script or just the character repeating lines without realizing it. It's curious to realize how vanity is one of the most universal keys. Simply touching someone's vanity is enough to make them lower their guard. A well-timed compliment can open doors that no amount of brute force could. A look of admiration can win more loyal allies than years of promises. But the Machiavellian doesn't praise out of habit. He praises out of calculation. He knows that by inflating the other's ego, he is creating a silent debt. The praised person feels the need to reciprocate in some way, and this need can be exploited at the ideal moment. Calculated praise is like a coin that yields invisible interest, because sooner or later it will be returned in the form of obedience. Another path is to exploit weaknesses. Everyone has vulnerable points, fears, insecurities, secrets. Whoever discovers and keeps this information has a silent arsenal at their disposal. It's not necessary to use it immediately, it just needs to be there. Many people become obedient simply because they know the other person knows something that cannot be revealed. This type of manipulation is even more powerful because it doesn't require action, just presence. The mere fact that you know is enough to control, and the more subtle the signs that you know, the greater the effect. You don't need to threaten, you don't need to expose, just make it clear that your memory is long. But the most refined power lies in creating dependency. When someone needs you to achieve their goals, you become irreplaceable. Manipulation isn't just about exploiting weaknesses, but also about offering solutions. This is what Machiavelli would teach the prince. Make yourself necessary. If everyone depends on you to advance, to prosper, to survive, no one will dare attack you. Think about how many times you've tolerated someone you didn't like just because you needed them for something. This is the core of dependency. It's not about liking, it's about not being able to let go. And creating dependency is one of the most subtle arts, because it requires patience. You need to offer small doses of help, create bonds of usefulness, until the person realizes they can't walk without you. Have you ever wondered who you really depend on? Have you realized who depends on you? This scale defines your position on the board. Manipulation also requires the ability to control rewards and punishments. If you give everything at once, you lose power. If you never offer anything, you lose power too. The balance lies in timing, in offering rewards at strategic moments and imposing small punishments when necessary. This dance creates an invisible rhythm, where others become accustomed to seeking your approval and fearing your disapproval. A smile from you can become a reward. A silence can become punishment. The more others value these signals, the more power you have. Manipulation isn't just in what you do, but in what you withhold. And there's one element many overlook: manipulation through chaos. Sometimes purposefully creating disorganization is the best way to take control. When everyone is confused, distressed, and directionless, the one who stands firm and offers a way out automatically becomes the leader. Manipulating chaos is one of the oldest. Military, religious, and political leaders have used this strategy to consolidate their position. They create or exploit crises, and then emerge as saviors. Desperate people hand over power without question. In everyday life, this also works. In the workplace, when everyone is lost, all it takes is for you to position yourself calmly and clearly for them to become loyal followers. Chaos is fertile ground for manipulation. Have you ever noticed how some people only shine when everything else falls apart? Is it chance or calculation? Another powerful detail is manipulation through information. Knowing something others don't is always an advantage. Those with access to information control decisions. Therefore, great strategists have always cultivated networks of informants, people who provided information in exchange for favors. Today, this logic remains alive. Those who observe more, who listen more, who retain details, manipulate better. Because information isn't just knowledge, it's leverage. And those who know how to use this leverage can move crowds without them even realizing they're being moved. Time is also an ally in manipulation. Often it's not necessary to act immediately, but to let time work in your favor. A doubt cast, a subtle insinuation, an ambiguous gesture can ripen in the other person's mind like a seed. Little by little, they begin to believe the idea was theirs, that the decision was their own. This is the height of manipulation, when the manipulated person believes they are in control. It is at this point that art merges with nature itself. Perfect manipulation leaves no trace, generates no resistance because the other person doesn't realize they've been manipulated. How many times have you made a decision believing it was yours, when in fact someone had already planted that idea in your mind long before? But perhaps the most unexpected twist lies in the manipulation of one's own enemies. It's common to think that enemies should be eliminated or ignored, but great masters of power know that enemies can also be used. A public enemy, for example, can be turned into a ladder. Opposition creates tension, and this tension reinforces their image of strength. Many leaders rose precisely because they had visible enemies who, by attacking them, only increased their relevance. The secret is not to rush to destroy the enemy, but to know when and how to use them. Sometimes the enemy is more useful alive than dead, more useful active than defeated. They become a piece on your board, even if they don't realize it. Have you ever used an opponent's strength to your advantage? Or have you always just tried to defeat them immediately? Manipulation is an art that requires disguise. You can't openly show that you're manipulating, because manipulation only works when it appears spontaneous. It's like the work of an illusionist. You know there's a trick, but you can't see it. Manipulation needs to be subtle, almost imperceptible. When done well, it seems natural. It seems coincidental. Others believe they're living their own will, but in reality, they're dancing to the tune you've chosen. This subtlety is what differentiates the refined manipulator from the amateur. The amateur forces, pressures, threatens. The refined one leads, suggests, insinuates. One is feared with resistance, the other is followed with devotion. And this is where manipulation connects to real-life suspense. Because well-executed manipulation not only solves the present, but builds a future where everyone is already positioned exactly where you want them. It's like moving pieces on a chessboard months in advance. Each move seems small, but together, they form an inescapable trap. And by the time the other person realizes it, they're already surrounded. This is the power of hidden strategy, not winning by shouting, but by inevitability. Your opponent may resist, but they will eventually fall into the net you've patiently woven. Have you begun to realize who the pieces you can move in your own life are? Who are the pawns, the bishops, the rooks, and who acts like a king? And here we come to the moment of greatest tension, because so far we've talked about manipulating allies, enemies, information, and even time. But there's something even darker and more powerful: self-manipulation. Yes, because the manipulator who can't manipulate their own desires, impulses, and weaknesses is always at risk of being discovered. The greatest of all manipulations is deceiving yourself at just the right level, hiding from yourself what could sabotage your plans, training yourself to appear natural when, in fact, you're calculating every step. This is the final layer of manipulation, the one that turns you into a power machine. Because if you control even your own reflection, no mask can slip, no truth can escape. And now the final question of this section resonates loudly. How far are you willing to go to manipulate, to lead, to move people, enemies, and even yourself like pieces on a board? This answer cannot be given lightly, because manipulation is irreversible. Once you learn to see the world this way, you'll never see human relationships the same way again. And what comes next will be even more decisive. Because after learning to manipulate, there's only one step left: to consolidate it all into a legacy that will endure. Being feared, respected, untouchable, and strategic is only the path. The ultimate destination is to become eternal, someone who, even in absence, continues to rule. We've reached the end of this journey, and it's no ordinary ending. It's the closing of a cycle of revelations that began with the discovery that the world is not governed by kindness, but by strength and perception. You've walked the walls of respect, cross the moat of fear, don the armor of an untouchable image, and learn to move human pieces on an invisible board of strategies and manipulations. Now the final step remains, transforming all this into a legacy, into eternity, into something that goes beyond flesh and bones, beyond time and circumstance. The pinnacle is not just being feared and respected today, but being remembered tomorrow, even when you're no longer here. It's achieving the consecration of power, not as a passing tyranny, but as an eternal presence in the memories of others. And what does it mean to consecrate yourself? It means living in such a way that your absence is felt as if it were a constant presence. It means building an identity so solid that even when they try to erase it, it reappears in conversations, thoughts, and stories. This is when you stop being just a person and become a reference. To be a reference is to be a model, to be remembered, to be quoted. And the brutal truth is that few achieve this feat because most live as shadows, go unnoticed, leaving traces that the wind erases. But those who understand and apply Machiavellian laws build traces so deep that no storm can destroy them. Think for a moment about the names you still remember from history. Why do you remember them? It wasn't because they were loved by everyone, nor because they were perfect. You remember them because they were intense, because they were impossible to ignore, because they carried within them the power of respect and fear. You don't need to be an emperor, a general, or a great political leader to reach this level. In your circle, in your life, in your environment, you too can become that indelible figure. It's a matter of choice, discipline, and courage. Courage is perhaps the most overlooked element when we talk about power. Everyone wants techniques, strategies, shortcuts, but nothing works without courage. The courage to set limits, the courage to say no, the courage to maintain silence, the courage to be hated, the courage to endure the loneliness that accompanies those who stand out. Because being feared and respected is walking a road few dare to follow. Most prefer the comfort of being loved superficially, but the destiny of the strong is to accept the weight of being deeply feared. And it is precisely in this weight that true freedom is born. Now imagine your own life. Imagine the people around you, the environments you frequent, the challenges you face. How many times have you felt your voice wasn't heard, your actions ignored, your presence insufficient to make an impact? How many times have you been treated as an option, as replaceable, as invisible? And how many times have you silently wished you were someone impossible to ignore, someone who, upon entering a room, immediately changed the atmosphere, someone who left a mark on every encounter? This desire isn't vanity, it's instinct. Every human being wants to be remembered, but only some choose to pay the price of transformation. The path to this transformation lies before you. It's not an easy path, but it's clear. Master yourself first. Without self-control, nothing stands. Control your image. Don't let others define who you are. Define yourself and make them believe. Cultivate calculated fear. It's not about violence, but about unpredictability, firmness, and insurmountable limits. Learn to manipulate, not to destroy, but to guide, to use the energies of others to your advantage. And finally, live in such a way as to build a presence that will become myth. This means that your every act must carry the seed of eternity. Every gesture must be remembered. Every silence must echo. It may seem impossible, but it's simple. Simple not because it doesn't require effort, but because the path is already laid out. Life gives you daily opportunities to apply each of these laws. At work, when you choose to remain silent instead of justifying yourself. At home, when you set a limit instead of giving in. On the street, when you maintain your composure instead of losing control. Online, when you choose not to respond to provocations that would only diminish your aura. These are small decisions, but together they create the narrative that will make you seen as different. It's in the details that the legend is built. And you might wonder, but is it worth it? Is it worth being feared? Is it worth being respected to that extent? The answer lies in another question. Is it worth living invisibly? Is it worth going through life without leaving a mark, without being remembered, without being taken seriously? Because the alternative is this. Either you become a presence impossible to ignore, or you will be just one among millions. And if you've come this far, watching, listening, absorbing every word, it's because you already know you weren't born to be just one more. The consecration of power requires you to accept the consequences as well. There will be loneliness, because few can bear to walk that path. There will be hatred, because your presence will arouse envy and resentment. There will be attempts at destruction, because there are always those who cannot bear to see someone standing above the crowd. But none of this matters when you understand that each enemy is just further proof of your strength. The more they try to erase you, the clearer it will become that you are ineradicable. The more they speak against you, the more your image will grow. The true sign of greatness is to generate a reaction. The silence of others about you is the greatest insult. The noise you make is the greatest victory. And here's the final key. Turn all of this into daily practice. Don't wait for a grand moment to start. Start now. Choose a situation where you would normally justify yourself and don't. Choose an environment where you would normally seek acceptance and don't. Choose a relationship where you would normally be weak and set boundaries. It's these small acts that accumulated become walls, moats, armor, and boards. Power isn't born overnight. It's born of repetition. A legacy isn't built in one gesture, but in 1,000 gestures that all point in the same direction. And as you practice, something begins to change. At first, people will find it strange. They'll say you've changed, that you're cold, that you're distant. Some will try to bring you back to the comfort of your old self. But if you resist, if you keep going, you'll soon see the results. They'll begin to measure their words, to watch you cautiously, to talk about you even when you're not there. Your absence will be felt. Your presence will be awaited. You'll have taken the first step toward becoming untouchable, feared, and respected. And when this process is complete, you will have achieved something rare: freedom. Freedom from dependence on the approval of others, freedom from manipulation, freedom from being discarded. You will have become your own master, and those who master themselves master the world. This is the point Machiavelli knew, and so many ignore. External power always begins with internal power. The world can be hostile, unpredictable, cruel, but those who build a fortress within themselves can weather any storm. Now fate is in your hands. You can close this video and continue living as always, trying to please, trying to be loved, being ignored, being replaceable. Or you can decide that today is the day your transformation begins. It doesn't matter if you have a simple job, a middling social position, or a hostile environment. Power doesn't depend on where you are, but on how you behave. If you master the laws, sooner or later the world will have to bow, because it's impossible to ignore someone who lives by discipline, silence, calculated fear, an untouchable image, and strategic manipulation. Perhaps you still feel fear of losing people, fear of being rejected, fear of making mistakes. But this fear is precisely the raw material for your transformation. Use it. Transform it into fuel. The fear that paralyzes others will be the engine that drives you. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear, it is action despite it. If you act despite fear, you're already on the right path. Every step you take will be another brick in your invisible fortress. And when you look back, you'll realize you're no longer just another person. You'll have become a reference, a symbol, a myth. Your presence will be remembered. Your absence will be felt. Your name will be spoken with respect, fear, or even hatred, but never with indifference. And that is the greatest victory a human being can achieve, never to be forgotten. This is the final call. The world is full of voices that want you to remain small, full of systems that prefer you to remain weak. But you don't have to accept this. You can stand up now and start writing a new story. A story of strength, of respect, of untouchability. A story in which you are the protagonist, not a supporting character. And if you've understood every word so far, you already know there are no more excuses. The next step is yours. If this video opened your mind, if it provoked reflections, if it lit a fire that was dormant, then don't let it go out. Like this video, share it, comment, even anonymously if you prefer, and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey. Here you'll find more than entertainment. Here you'll find the keys to a power few have the courage to seek. Your transformation begins now, and if you have the courage to continue, you'll discover that no one can defeat those who master themselves.